So I'm Ryan Nolette. I've been doing IR and forensic-y fun stuff for about 15 years now. There's my GitHub page if you're interested in any of the public stuff I've done. As part of this talk, I'm actually giving away an Amazon detonation lab, so that URL at the bottom is a quick, easy way to set up a fully configured detonation lab in AWS. It takes about 5 minutes, builds a cool topology. I'll expand on that a little bit more. And of course, Time Person of the Year 2006. Come on. 3 people got the reference, and I like you. All right, so the things that we're going to go over are pretty much the overview of why cloud really isn't that scary, right? If you guys are all used to trying to protect the perimeter that's on your on-prem network, it's really the same thing, just with different words now. So I'm going to go through some of the logging examples that you guys can do, and then go over an end-to-end example showing how you could actually do the exact same investigation that you're doing, or the same kind of hunt right now. So the who, did what, and when. These are the questions that I like to try and go through for every single time I have to work through any kind of threat hunt, right? I want to bucket things into 2 groups, visibility and accountability. Because if you can't see it, you can't account for it. Therefore, I need to keep increasing my visibility until I can account for everything, which is a nice end state. So to get to that end state, we do the same typical things, right? Use OS hardening. Do you guys subscribe to NIST or CIS or any of those benchmarks, right? You still can apply those to your templates in AWS. Config management. You can run Ansible, Chef. You can use CloudFormation. There's a ton of tools that you can use to maintain that. Identity management and process monitoring, those are a little bit more interesting, and that's because of things like serverless computing. So bucketing those back into the visibility and accountability buckets, what you're really trying to do is answer those 3 questions of, who did what and when they did it, right? Because if you can answer any of those questions, you can circle through and answer the other 2, right? That's where you really want to be. I want to be able to say, I know when this happened, now who did what? Right? And until you're able to answer those questions, you haven't added enough visibility to have that accountability. What are some common tools that we all use? Right? We use IDSs, we have EDR tools, we do different things for NetFlow or identity management. Well, these are the equivalents that are there. Right? Instead of NetFlow, it's called VPC flow. Do we know why? Because it's the NetFlow in your VPC, which is your virtual private cloud. When you set things up inside your Amazon account, you're putting them in either one or a zillion different VPCs that you create. It's your own little virtual private space to play. So increasing that visibility. What we want to do is we want to use these different groupings of controls. Up here, I broke it into about 6 different groups. There's more, of course. You guys have all seen different compliance charts. So this is going through more of what are the tools that are either native to the AWS realm or are able to be used either free or just open source in general. So authentication logs, you're using tools like IAM, which allows you to control the identities that log into your account in your different Amazon resources. But that doesn't say who logs in on the actual instance, right? So you still need to collect the logs off the instances that you spin up to see, did the person sign in as root? Did they sign in as Apache for some reason? And those kinds of normal system configs. But the end-to-end example, this is going to be kind of fun because I did this in my detonation lab that I stood up with these scripts that I'm giving away. And what's kind of cool is this is the typical instance for people that have extensions to their on-prem networks. So right now, show of hands, whose bosses told them that they're going to the cloud? Right? All right? Who actually wants to do that, right? It sounds scary. It has a whole lot of different controls and things. But what I kind of want to bring out is, cloud's not going to rain on your parade. Yes, cloud reference, dad joke, thank you. The thing is, a lot of people are just looking at things of, can I bring my current technologies up with me? And that's often no, because those products were designed for static systems in traditional networks. Well, that doesn't always work. So what I've done here is I've built this CloudFormation template, which I'll talk more about CloudFormation in the lightning talk to give you an idea of what it does. But you basically run this script, and it goes in and configures your entire topology for you. This is the topology that it builds. It has a private VPC that I stuck 4 systems in, and that's guarded by a Bastion host. So I can do all kinds of fun stuff in there, but nothing really leaks out. Inside, I have a red team server, which is where I'm going to be doing my attacks from for this demonstration. I have a Windows victim, and I have a Linux victim, and then I have a Wazoo server. Has anyone here ever heard of Wazoo or used it? No? All right. How about OSSec? People know what that is? All right. Oh, Wazoo is a more commercial version of that. It's basically an elastic stack with an app that does OSSec stuff on top of a lot of other new features. But the reason why I'm using them is because I worked with their team over the last 3 months to build in ways to ingest logs from AWS. All the different logs that I normally use to do detections, they now can all ingest. So super big shout out to the developer, Marta, because she's the one that actually developed all of this for the Wazoo side. The pipelines that this template builds look kind of complicated. And that's because there's a different methodology with things in AWS and other cloud providers. Right? They're no longer talking about your application, your instance, or terms like that. Now things are being called workloads because people are moving off of, I'm going to stand up an instance in E2, I'm going to install Apache, NGX, whatever, and run my application off that instance. Well, that's pretty expensive because there's a lot of overhead that's unnecessary to do your end goal, which is run that one application or your one workload. That's where people start moving into things like Lambda or Kubernetes, I never can pronounce it. Docker-style virtualization systems. That's why people are moving their stuff there, because it's significantly cheaper to run the same workloads. So the first tool that we went over is CloudFormation. This is what I use for automation. If I want to stand up a stack to quickly poke at some new attacks that I just learned, I'll run this script, and somewhere around 5 minutes from there, I have that full detonation lab set up. Right? The same kind of idea. It's quick, it's repeatable, it's free. Big fan. S3, that's just where I dump all my logs. That's it. It's just a giant bucket, and they're actually called buckets. So that allows me to store the data that I'm pulling from all these different logging sources. VPC, we quickly went over. That's just the virtual network that all my instances are going to be installed into. VPC flow is what monitors intra-instance and extra-instance network traffic. That allows me to monitor any connections between the systems in the VPC as well as external to the VPC. Lambda, this is a piece of code that I'm using to add an enrichment metadata to my VPC flow. Firehose, this is what collects those logs. So I'm sending all my logs to a Firehose, which can actually handle that kind of volume, because Firehose scales natively. So if today I only have 20,000 logs, 20,000 traffic events, but tomorrow I have 20 million, it will still scale for that. This is that identity management that we've been messing around with. This is how I create all the users that are allowed to access my S3 buckets, as well as are allowed to run different privileged items from inside my network. CloudTrail. CloudTrail monitors API calls. So anytime you interact with the AWS console or use AWS CLI or any of those native tools, you're interacting with the AWS APIs. Every single time you do that, you are generating events in CloudTrail. So we use CloudTrail for all kinds of fun detection stuff. Did somebody just exfil your temporary credentials from your instance and are now using them to access your S3 buckets? There's CloudTrail events for that. And we can use them to simply say, this bad thing happened. Really, really useful for correlation. Macy, this is an actual security tool that people use. This monitors and categorizes data in your S3 buckets. So if Bill from accounting uploaded one of his spreadsheets and it has social security numbers in it and stuff, that gets flagged. So it does cool stuff like that. And you can create your own different triggers. If you want something to flag on if the name Ben is in there, you can write something like that. Kind of think of it like, just based on what it's called, but the data, it's not DEP, it's a compliance one that I can't think of right now. So Inspector, this is my vulnerability scanner. This allows me to scan against my instances for things like CIS compliance, common vulnerabilities, OWASP, POP10, stuff like that. And CloudWatch event rules and logs. This is the main thing that I use to capture events from these services so I can forward those logs and write them to my S3 bucket. Without CloudWatch monitoring all those different services, nothing's actually grabbing the logs out of the service when they happen. So you can log everything, but the only way you'll see it is in the console of that tool. This allows me to take it out of that tool and drop it in S3 so then I can ingest it into an Elastic Stack kind of setup. And then GuardDuty. This is another tool that works kind of like, I'd say kind of like an IDS / behavioral analysis tool. And it has a bunch of pre-configured stuff that it looks for. This one is just looking for a cryptocurrency. This is traffic going from one of my instances to a known destination that's been categorized as cryptocurrency. And then this is Wazoo. Once again, big shout out to them for all the stuff that they did for me. Huge, huge help. This is what I'm using for an EDR tool in here. This basically installs OSSec on the different instances, as well as it's going to pull stuff into my log stash and eventually feed my Kibana dashboards, which is extremely, extremely helpful because now I can do full stack analysis. I have an EDR tool. I have a tool to look at my network traffic. I have a tool to look at my identity management, my config, vulnerability scanning, and categorization of compliance stuff, and it all gets dropped into one place for me. This is what the Detonation Lab CloudFormation script does. So you guys can go in there and play around, and it'll tell you what breaks and where. To give you an idea of some of the mapping stuff that I've done, this is just for CloudTrail events. I wanted to give an idea of how many things overlap between these logs that allow you to map between them in order to do further kinds of detection, right? If you're hunting through data and none of the data is communicating or connected together, how do you end up connecting those relationships between the data? Well, what I ended up doing is I took common overlapping things. For instance, for the AWS account, we have something called an ARN, which is an ID. You have a principal ID. You have an access key ID. Those are overlapping fields under account management. So those are what identify accounts. By using that, I can now connect every event from every AWS service I have that uses one of those 4 identifiers, and I can map it to the same account now. So that's huge for the attack that I'm going to be showing. So example of a couple of the dashboards. Here's some simple, easy, pretty pictures. Management loves these. These are not that helpful, but management loves them, so keep them in mind. The idea for these are top external destination IPs. You know, not always helpful. I have the accounts for guard duty alerts. So this is how many, these are the accounts that set up guard duty alerts. I only have one account in the test lab that gets destroyed, so I only have one account there. But in a real production environment, you could have a couple hundred IDs. And this tells you which one of your users is constantly doing things that are weird. Next up are talkative, most talkative instances based on their interface ID, right? When you have these virtual instances, you can put as many NICs in them as you want. So how do we know if a instance is being talkative or if their attacker is moving the NIC to different systems so they can run traffic outside of your monitoring? Cool attacks like that. This ends up capturing things like that. So finding what matters. This is what I did with the Kibana boards that come in this, I feel like voice of God just happened there. The Kibana boards, these are going to use all these dashboards and it'll show you what's happening. So this is a threat hunt that I had a junior analyst do, right? They went in and they started looking at places where there's a ton of traffic. Now this is a test detonation lab. This is not production data. So it looks an awful lot like China has a lot of traffic going to it. Maybe they're outsourcing their math, but most likely what's happening is something is sending out and talking. So I dig into that country. From there, I can see a massive spike of traffic that happened yesterday. But all the other days before it, for 30 days, nothing has happened. I can dig into that and see that the top IP address is this 58.218 address. Well, from there, I can go and search and see if any alerts happened for that destination. And lo and behold, I have some alerts for this IP. Magically, for this demo, everything worked out perfectly. So this now allows me to find what internal instance has this fun traffic to it. And now I want to see why this thinks that I have something talking out to a cryptocurrency exchange. And I can use those logs for the EDR tool to find out that my netstat table changed, and it shows a binary called pip 3.7 that is using that destination IP address. And when I go into that, I can see that it was installed by the user Apache, and then I can look at the hashes for that binary, and VirusTotal happens to have that as a known crypto miner. Yes, there's a lot of conspiracies about how well this worked out. But the overall idea is all of this information was able to be related together, and we were able to do a full stack investigation of something that happened, right? All this was visual. I didn't have to go and dig through a couple million lines of text. I was able to pull these together very quickly and easily to show this full picture. This is something I would end up presenting to management of a great example of this junior analyst who's ready to take on more responsibility. Right? They were able to go start to finish without any issues, and were able to connect all the different disparate data sets that they ended up having to work with, all within free and open source products. So how did they get in? Now, this one I actually have a feature request out for because it's not currently baked in, but I went ahead and I used Inspector to do some scanning of my instances, and I found that my web server on the Linux victim has not been patched. So, wah, wah. I wonder if it was a web shell, but most likely it was just a really bad web server that ran netcat to an attacker. Now, to do kind of a recap, right? Does cloud seem as scary now? I hope not, because every tool that I just used is available on-prem. And most likely, if you have a SOC Hell, if we have something simple like free and open source security onion running with OSSec, that's all free. Yes, the cost is really an effort for setting stuff up, but you could do everything that I just did without spending any money outside of hardware, right? So I wanted to go through that stuff of showing these are common tools. They just have a different name right now, and we're working on naming conventions to make things a little clearer for people. But with the last couple of minutes that I have, I want to get to the most serious question, the attacker lifestyle. Now, this is in honor of Sqrrl, because if anybody knows my corgi attacker life cycle, this is quite similar, though this is from the idea of the cryptocurrency miner. We have script kiddie scanning around the internet, looking for open addresses. They end up popping one and run a cryptocurrency miner. All of a sudden, they have some cash. So they buy the fancy car. They own the only Lamborghini in Eastern Europe. Somehow that stands out for some reason. They get investigated for tax evasion. They get arrested. They flip on people, and now they're in the Witness Protection Agency, and they want to start it all over again. I'd watch that movie. So, kind of my motto that I like to have, coming from a blue team perspective, is flag it, tag it, and bag it, aka the double tap. If you find something, flag it, right? It's either the user manually looking for things in a threat hunt, your static defenses that are looking for common signatures or anything else, right? Show what happened, then tag it. Even if it doesn't look weird, even if it doesn't look malicious, if it looks anomalous, tag it. And eventually you build enough information to it to bag it and get that out of your network. So I ended up right on time for minutes. Do we want to do questions or push them to the end so that way we can keep on schedule? Play Freebird. All right, and while they're talking, that's just so much fun.
All right.
It makes me happy.
You good?
Oh, yeah.
All right,
yeah.
round of applause.